No one really noticed when it happened. There wasn't some blinding flash or trembling sky, just a quiet moment when humanity looked up and realized we weren't alone anymore. One signal. One faint pulse from deep space. At first, people thought it was just another false alarm, but it wasn't. It was an invitation or maybe a warning from something far older, far larger than we could imagine. A galactic empire, billions of species, thousands of worlds, all connected under one flag. And somehow, through a mix of curiosity, luck, and that classic human stubbornness, we had stumbled right into the middle of it. When the first contact was made, the aliens didn't seem hostile. They looked at us with curiosity, the same way scientists watch a strange animal at the edge of a forest. To them, Earth was a backwater world, unremarkable, underdeveloped, and frankly, a little embarrassing. But then came the moment that changed everything. Humanity, standing before the towering ambassadors of the Empire, didn't kneel. We didn't flinch. We greeted them like equals. That small act, that simple confidence, sent ripples through their entire civilization, because in the Galactic Empire, no new species had ever dared to stand tall. It wasn't arrogance. It was instinct. From the first stone tools to the first rockets, humans had always met the unknown with wide eyes and clenched fists. The Empire's historians called it reckless courage. We called it survival. They expected fear, submission, maybe awe. Instead, they got negotiation. Calm, polite, and firm. Humanity wasn't there to beg for acceptance. We were there to talk, to learn, and to see how far we could go. And that unsettled them. Soon, word spread across the Empire. A primitive species from the edge of the galaxy had arrived, uninvited, and refused to bow. The old races whispered about us. Some laughed, calling us children playing with fire. Others watched more carefully, remembering legends of worlds that had once burned bright before vanishing. But there were a few, the ones who understood what that kind of confidence meant, who felt something else entirely. Fear. The first meeting didn't end with an alliance or a war. It ended with silence. Both sides watching, waiting to see what the other would do next. And as the humans' small exploration ship drifted among the stars of the Empire, every scanner and every pair of eyes followed its path. Some wanted to crush us before we could rise. Others wanted to test us, to see if the stories of human resilience were true. Back on Earth, no one knew the full scale of what had just happened. The media called it the encounter. Politicians called for caution. Scientists wanted to send more ships. But somewhere, in the quiet halls of the Empire's capital, a decision was being made. One that would shape the future of humanity forever. Because the humans hadn't just entered the Galactic Empire. They had stepped onto a stage that had seen empires rise and fall for millennia. And somewhere, hidden among the stars, the first test was already waiting. The ship that carried humanity's first crew into the Empire was small, barely more than a long-range explorer with patched wiring and a hull that creaked whenever it jumped between stars. The crew wasn't made of heroes or soldiers, just a handful of scientists, engineers, and pilots who had signed up for what they thought would be a simple mapping mission. They had no idea that one course correction would place them in the middle of a civilization that had existed long before Earth's first city was even built. Their names didn't matter as much as their reactions. The pilot, calm and quiet, kept his hands steady even when faced with alien ships larger than mountains. The scientist beside him, eyes wide, tried to capture every detail, every flicker of light that danced across the alien vessels. The communications officer struggled to keep her voice from shaking when the first message came through, a deep, layered sound that no translator could fully grasp. It wasn't just a language, it was a presence. Something about it made their hearts pound faster, as if the sound itself carried the weight of 1,000 forgotten wars. The Empire's representatives didn't hide their surprise. Humans weren't supposed to be there. According to their maps, Earth's system wasn't even marked as inhabited, but when they scanned our little blue planet and saw the lights of our cities, the electromagnetic noise of our technology, the pulse of human life, they realized they had overlooked something, a species that had grown strong in isolation, fierce and unpredictable, born under gravity and hardship. And that unpredictability was what made the Empire nervous. They had seen species rise fast before, civilizations that discovered spaceflight, expanded, and eventually broke under their own ambition. But humans, there was something different. We didn't conquer our world through strength or speed. We adapted. We survived everything thrown at us, drought, war, extinction, and somehow kept moving forward. That kind of persistence didn't fit neatly into the Empire's system of order and hierarchy. While diplomats on Earth tried to open peaceful talks, the Empire sent observers. They arrived quietly, hidden behind false names and strange human disguises, studying how we lived. They watched how we argued, how we laughed, how we refused to give up even when the odds made no sense. Some of them grew fascinated, others grew worried. Humanity's drive, our stubborn refusal to yield, felt like a spark that could ignite something far greater than anyone expected. In the deep councils of the Empire, voices rose. Some wanted to guide humanity, to bring us under their control before we could become a threat. Others argued that we should be left alone, that contact would only lead to conflict. The oldest among them remembered a time when a young species had once defied the Empire's rules. That story didn't end well for anyone. And then came the whisper of something strange, unconfirmed reports from distant colonies, speaking of a symbol found carved into abandoned stations, a circle within a flame. No one knew what it meant, but it began to appear wherever human ships passed. Some said it was a warning. Others believed it was a message, a signal that humanity was no longer wandering blindly through the stars. Inside the small human vessel, the crew received new coordinates from an unknown source. The message was brief, only 3 words long. You are seen. No one could trace where it came from. No one could explain why their instruments began to flicker right after. But as the ship turned toward the dark region beyond the Empire's core worlds, every one of them felt it, the unmistakable sense that someone, or something, was waiting for them out there. And for the first time since leaving Earth, they began to wonder if they had truly stumbled into the Empire by accident, or if they had been led there all along. The coordinates led them into a part of space the Empire called the Veiled Expanse, a region shrouded by dense clouds of charged dust and old wreckage from wars long forgotten. The Empire's star charts warned that no ships should enter. The crew hesitated, but something about the signal, that quiet message, "You are seen," felt impossible to ignore. Against every protocol, they changed course. The moment they crossed the border, the stars vanished, instruments flickered, gravity shifted, and for a brief second it felt like time itself slowed down. Back in the Empire's capital, rumors spread faster than light. The humans had gone dark. Some thought their fragile ship had been torn apart. Others whispered that they had found something ancient, something the Empire wanted to stay hidden. A few of the younger ambassadors began to question whether humanity's arrival was really an accident, or if it was part of something far older moving beneath the surface of the Empire's history. Inside the veiled expanse, the human crew struggled to stay calm. Strange readings filled the sensors, structures buried in the mist, massive and silent, with power signatures that made no sense. They weren't natural. They weren't new either. It was as if someone had built entire cities and then erased them from existence. The pilot adjusted the ship's course, but the navigation systems kept realigning on their own, dragging them deeper. It was as if the place itself wanted them there. The scientist began piecing together fragments of data, symbols etched into the ruins that matched the markings seen on old human cave art. The resemblance was impossible, yet undeniable, the same shapes, the same spiral. Somehow, The pattern that had appeared on Earth long before humanity discovered fire existed here, light years away. The crew exchanged quiet looks, unease twisting in their stomachs. It wasn't just coincidence, it was connection. Meanwhile, the Empire dispatched a reconnaissance fleet under the guise of search and rescue. But not everyone on board those ships agreed on what their mission truly was. One faction wanted to retrieve the humans safely. Another intended to make sure they never returned. The tension between the crews was thick, and whispers of internal betrayal grew louder. For the first time in centuries, the Empire wasn't united. On Earth, global leaders debated their next step. Contact with the exploration team had been lost for days. Some called for a recall of all space missions. Others argued this was humanity's chance to prove it belonged among the stars. The world watched in silence, torn between fear and pride. Humanity's reputation had shifted from curiosity to potential threat, and that realization began to sink in at every level, from government officials to ordinary people staring up at the night sky. Inside the expanse, the human ship finally slowed near a vast structure floating in the dark, a ring of metal the size of a continent, humming softly like it was alive. The moment they scanned it, the signal returned. The same voice, calm and ancient, filled their comms. "You carry what was once ours." The words froze the crew. No one spoke. The scientist looked at the pilot, confusion giving way to dread. What could they possibly be carrying that belonged to someone out here? Before anyone could respond, the power flickered again, and a shadow moved across the hull, massive, deliberate, and impossibly close. They weren't alone anymore, and somewhere within that endless darkness, something had begun to wake. The shadow lingered on the hull of the ship, immense and silent. The crew held their breath as the sensors tried to analyze it, but every reading returned impossible values. It wasn't just large, it was older than any ship or structure they had ever seen. Its surface seemed to absorb light, yet hum with energy. The comms officer tried to reach the voice again, but only static replied, punctuated by a low, resonant pulse that vibrated through the metal floors. The crew could feel it in their chests, a warning or perhaps an invitation, they couldn't tell which. The pilot moved the ship cautiously, but the shadow followed, shifting as if it was alive. Every instinct screamed to retreat, but something held them in place. The scientist whispered over the intercom, pointing out that the symbols on the expanse's ruins were not just decorative, they were a map. A pattern emerged that seemed to point directly toward the structure in front of them. And at the center of that structure, deep inside, something waited. Something that had been dormant for centuries, maybe millennia, and now had sensed humans. Back in the Empire's capital, the young ambassadors who had advocated for observing humanity closely were in chaos. Fleets were being mobilized, orders conflicted. The oldest council members watched silently, knowing that one misstep could ignite war. The humans had triggered events that even the Empire's vast history hadn't prepared them for. They were not just explorers or trespassers, they were catalysts, moving through threads of time and power the Empire barely understood. Inside the human ship, tension crackled between the crew members. Fear, curiosity, and determination tangled together. They had trained for emergencies, for hostile encounters, but nothing in their simulations could have prepared them for this. The pilot felt a hand on the console, a silent reminder that decisions now had consequences that stretched far beyond their own survival. The scientist, eyes wide with awe, pointed to readings indicating the structure's core was active. Energy levels spiked and dropped in patterns almost like a heartbeat. Then the ship's sensors picked up something even more alarming, a massive fleet approaching from beyond the expanse, moving faster than any Empire vessel should be capable of. No one on Earth knew they were here. No one in the Empire's official channels expected it. And yet the humans were caught between the shadow on the hull and the fleet advancing with silent precision. There was no obvious escape, No plan that could guarantee survival. Every option was risky, every move a potential trigger. The comms officer tried again, voice trembling but firm. "Who are you? What do you want?" The static pulsed, then a single phrase came through, distorted but chilling. "Your kind has walked too far. Step inside." The pilot froze, gripping the controls. Step inside? Into what? The scientist leaned forward, scanning, heart pounding. Into them. Or it. Whatever that is. We don't have a choice. We're already in it. Lights flickered across the bridge as the energy from the structure pulsed again, larger and stronger this time. The shadow shifted closer, folding around the ship like a living barrier. The approaching fleet slowed, forming a perfect perimeter, surrounding them. The humans were trapped between two forces beyond comprehension, the ancient power within the expanse and the Empire's deadly, relentless fleet, closing in from all sides. The pilot took a deep breath, hands steadying on the controls, and whispered, "Hold on. Whatever happens next, we're not backing down." And in that moment, the ship trembled. The expanse's hum grew into a roar, and the shadow opened, revealing something so vast, so alive, that the crew could only stare, frozen in awe and fear, as the final stage of their trial began. The shadow that had swallowed the ship began to shift, folding inward and outward like a living labyrinth. The crew stared, hearts pounding as shapes emerged, colossal structures inside the shadow, glowing faintly with strange, pulsating light. It was a city, but not one built by hands. Its geometry defied reason, with towers that seemed to float and bridges that twisted impossibly through open space. And at the center, a core so bright it nearly blinded them through the viewport. The hum that had filled the hull now became a deep resonance that felt almost like a voice, echoing in their minds rather than their ears. Just as the crew tried to process what they were seeing, the approaching Empire fleet reacted. Ships that had seemed perfectly in formation now swerved violently, as if pulled by an invisible force. Reports flooded in from the fleet's sensors. Their weapons and shields were malfunctioning. Navigation systems were scrambling. Even the oldest, most disciplined captains admitted confusion, a rare crack in the Empire's legendary control. It was as if the Expanse, or whatever lived inside it, was aware not only of the humans, but of every move the Empire tried to make. The comms officer's voice trembled. It's responding to us. The structure, it's alive. It's aware." The scientist leaned over the console, scanning every possible reading. "And it's not just aware. It's recognizing patterns. It's recognizing us." She paused, disbelief spreading across her face. "Not our ship, not our crew, us. Humanity." The pilot swallowed hard. "Recognizing us? How? We've never been here before." "Exactly," the scientist whispered. "Unless someone or something has been waiting for humans all along." Before anyone could react further, the city inside the shadow pulsed again, sending a wave of energy outward. The ship's systems overloaded, alarms screaming as power flickered across the consoles. And then a second surprise hit. The fleet outside wasn't just trapped. They began receiving transmissions, not from the humans, not from the Expanse, but from each other. Private messages, command signals, even secret orders, all revealed to every ship at once. The Empire was hearing its own secrets in real time. Panic spread like wildfire among the admirals and captains. Inside the human ship, the crew realized something terrifying. The shadow wasn't just a barrier or a structure, it was an intelligence. It had reached out across light years, assessed the humans, assessed the Empire, and begun to manipulate both. Every move, every strategy, every calculation the Empire had relied on for centuries suddenly meant nothing. Then came the message, direct and unambiguous, not through the comms, but inside the crew's minds. "Do you remember?" No one knew what it meant. Memories flickered in fragments, ancient stories, myths, symbols from Earth long forgotten. The spiral in caves, the ring in the expanse, the same patterns appearing everywhere humans had ever looked to the stars. It was as if the expanse had been waiting for humans to reach this point, not by accident, but by design. The pilot gritted his teeth, realizing the stakes had shifted entirely. They were no longer just explorers. They were pawns, catalysts, and perhaps the key to something the galaxy had hidden for millennia. Every choice now carried consequences far beyond Earth, far beyond the Empire, far beyond anything humanity had faced. And as the Shadow City pulsed brighter, enveloping them completely, the voice returned, not threatening, not welcoming, but resolute. You were never meant to stumble here, but you are here now. Decide quickly, or be consumed. The crew held their breath. Outside, the Empire fleet waited, trapped. Inside, the Expanse watched. And somewhere between the two, humanity had become the center of a conflict older than the stars themselves. The hum of the Shadow City reached a deafening pitch, vibrating through the hull as if the structure itself were inhaling. The crew felt it in their bones, a pressure that made their hearts pound and their minds race. Every instrument on the ship flashed warnings, but the pilot refused to panic. "We came this far," he said, voice tight with resolve. "We finish it." The scientist's hands moved frantically across the console, analyzing the Expanse's energy pulses. "It's responding to us, our presence, our thoughts, even our emotions. It's judging us." Her voice dropped. "It's looking for something humans always carry: choice, courage, adaptability." Outside, the Empire fleet strained against the invisible forces of the Shadow City. Ships rocked as shields failed, weapons overloaded, and comms scrambled. Panic rippled through the ranks. The fleet's admiral, a seasoned veteran, realized that the humans were the only ones who could navigate the city's energy currents without being destroyed. Reluctantly, he ordered his ships to hold position. Survival depended on the humans. The comms officer's eyes widened as the city pulsed again. A passage opened in the energy field, a corridor of light, twisting and expanding into the unknown. The shadow wasn't trying to destroy them, it was offering a path. "It's letting us in," she said, barely above a whisper. The pilot steadied the ship and followed the corridor, engines straining, systems groaning. Every second was a test of nerve and skill. As they entered, the core of the Expanse revealed itself. A sphere of glowing light, ancient and impossibly powerful. Images flickered across its surface, memories of countless civilizations, patterns of life across galaxies, and then, unmistakably, humans. Every triumph, every failure, every small act of resilience humanity had ever shown flashed before their eyes. The sphere pulsed, and the resonance inside the crew's minds was overwhelming. A voice, calm and deep, filled the ship. "You have survived, adapted, and endured. You have chosen." The core shimmered, and suddenly, the Shadow City began to reshape. The structures, once alien and incomprehensible, aligned into patterns humans instinctively understood. Bridges, platforms, even corridors that felt like home. The intelligence had recognized them not as intruders, but as equals. Then came the final test. The core split into two energy streams, one reaching toward the humans, the other extending to the Empire fleet. "Unity or destruction," the voice intoned. "Will you guide your people or let fear consume you?" The crew realized that the Expanse demanded leadership, not for themselves, but for the entire galaxy. The pilot took a deep breath. "We guide. Together." The scientist, the comms officer, and the rest nodded. In that moment, the energy streams intertwined with the humans' intent. Across the Expanse, the Empire fleet's systems stabilized, the overwhelming pressure easing. The city's pulse synchronized with the humans' own hearts, acknowledging their choice. But just as relief began to settle, the core pulsed one last time, revealing an image no one expected. Earth. But it wasn't the planet they knew. It was surrounded by dormant constructs, waiting, silent. The intelligence spoke again, softer now, almost a whisper. The trial was not the expanse. It was what comes after. Your journey has only begun. The human crew stared in stunned silence. They had survived, they had passed, and yet the galaxy still held secrets far beyond their understanding. The Shadow City receded, the corridor closing, but the knowledge of what lay ahead burned brightly in their minds. Humanity had stood tall, as it always did, but the true challenge was only just beginning. Outside, the Empire fleet watched quietly. No longer enemies, no longer judges, just witnesses to the rise of a species that had unknowingly stepped into its destiny. And somewhere, beyond the stars, the expanse waited, patient for the next move. The human crew floated in silence as the expanse's energy slowly faded, leaving the ship surrounded by the familiar dark of space. The corridors of light had disappeared, but the memory of them lingered like a heartbeat. Every crew member felt it, the knowledge that they had been part of something far greater than any mission they had trained for, far beyond the limits of Earth or the Empire. They had not only survived, they had changed the rules of the galaxy. The Empire fleet remained nearby, silent and still. The oldest admirals finally broke the quiet, speaking into their comms, acknowledging the humans' achievement. No words of praise could capture what had happened, but there was respect in every tone. Humanity had stood firm, guided by courage, curiosity, and an adaptability that the galaxy had underestimated for far too long. For the first time, both sides understood something essential. Fear and suspicion could never define what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. The pilot exhaled, letting the tension leave his shoulders for the first time. "We made it," he said softly, though even those words felt small compared to what they had endured. The scientist smiled faintly, her eyes still reflecting the glow of the expanse's core. "We didn't just survive, we learned, and they recognized us." The comms officer began logging their findings, careful to capture every detail, the symbols, the pulse of the city, the intelligence that had judged them. It was more than data. It was proof that humanity had a place in the galaxy, one that could not be ignored or erased. Every story, every legend, every small act of human persistence had mattered. They had stepped into a living test and had emerged not just alive, but respected by an intelligence older than the stars themselves. Back on Earth, news of their survival spread, filtered through the Empire's cautious communications. Humanity's first encounter with the galactic civilization became a turning point. No longer were humans just curious explorers. Now they were participants in the wider galaxy, their actions shaping perceptions and alliances in ways no one had imagined. Scientists, politicians, and ordinary citizens looked to the stars with renewed wonder, and a quiet understanding that humanity was capable of far more than they had ever believed. As the human ship set a course home, the crew reflected on what they had learned. Courage alone was not enough. It was intelligence, unity, and the refusal to be defined by fear that had carried them through. The symbols from the expanse, the messages, the pulses, all were reminders that the galaxy was far bigger than Earth, and that humans were ready to stand among it. In the final moments, the ship's sensors picked up one last flicker of the Shadow City, deep in the distance, almost imperceptible. It was a silent acknowledgement, a reminder that the galaxy held challenges and wonders still waiting to be discovered. The crew shared a quiet nod, understanding that this was only the beginning of humanity's story, even if the first chapter had ended. As stars stretched across the viewport, the pilot spoke quietly. "We went in as humans, unsure, untested. We come out as something more. Not heroes, not conquerors, just ourselves. And that is enough." The ship glided through the void, carrying humanity forward into the unknown, leaving behind the expanse, but carrying with them a new sense of purpose, a new respect in the galaxy, and the knowledge that standing tall was what humans had always done, and would always do.